The crystal glass shattered as red wine cascaded down Isaiah Washington's custom suit. Eleanor Whitfield's sneer dissolved into shock when Isaiah calmly wiped his face and revealed his identity. "I'm afraid Monarch Enterprises will have to reconsider your family's proposal," he stated quietly. "All $1 billion of it." Before we dive into this shocking story, drop a quick comment telling me where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want more stories about karma catching up to the entitled. Now let's rewind and see how a single moment of prejudice cost the Whitfield family everything they had. Isaiah Washington had never taken the easy path in life. At 42, the founder and CEO of Monarch Enterprises stood at the pinnacle of the tech world, his company valued at a staggering $50 billion. But the journey to that summit had been anything but smooth. Born in Harlem, New York, Isaiah's early years were defined by loss when his parents died in a car accident when he was just 7 years old. Raised by his grandmother, Beatrice Washington, in a modest two-bedroom apartment, Isaiah learned the value of education, perseverance, and dignity in the face of adversity. "My grandmother used to tell me that excellence is the best response to racism," Isaiah often recalled in interviews. She said that when people try to put limits on you because of the color of your skin, your job is to shatter those limits so completely that they can't deny your worth. And shatter those limits he did. Despite attending underfunded public schools, Isaiah's brilliant mind and relentless work ethic earned him a full scholarship to MIT, where he studied computer science and electrical engineering. His professors quickly recognized his exceptional talent, though not all of his classmates were as accepting. "I remember group projects where no one wanted to partner with me," Isaiah once shared with a group of minority students at an outreach event. "They assumed I was only there because of affirmative action, not because I deserved to be. So I started doing the projects alone and consistently outperformed every group in the class." After MIT, Isaiah was accepted to Harvard Business School, where he earned his MBA with honors. Even with these prestigious credentials, he faced constant racial prejudice in the corporate world. Job interviews where recruiters seemed surprised by his eloquence. Meetings where his ideas were ignored until a white colleague repeated them. Promotions that mysteriously went to less qualified candidates. After 5 frustrating years in corporate America, Isaiah decided to chart his own path. With $15,000 in savings and a revolutionary algorithm he had developed, he founded Monarch Enterprises from his small apartment 15 years ago. The early days were brutal. Venture capitalists would enthusiastically respond to his business plan via email, only to visibly lose interest when they met him in person. Some even suggested he hire a white person to be the face of the company for investor meetings. Isaiah refused. "If they don't believe in me, they don't deserve to profit from my vision," he told his first employee, Michael Chen, who joined Monarch when it was just a 2-person operation run out of Isaiah's living room. That unwavering belief in himself eventually paid off. Monarch's first product, a revolutionary data security platform, gained traction among small businesses before catching the attention of several major corporations. By year 3, Monarch had expanded to 30 employees and moved into its first official office space. What truly set Monarch apart, however, wasn't just its innovative technology, but Isaiah's leadership philosophy. Having experienced discrimination firsthand, he built diversity and inclusion into the company's DNA. Monarch boasted one of the most diverse workforces in tech, with people of all backgrounds, not just employed but empowered at every level of the organization. "Diversity isn't charity," Isaiah frequently reminded his executive team. "It's competitive advantage. Different perspectives lead to better problem solving." This approach proved remarkably successful. While other tech giants struggled with homogeneous thinking and blind spots in their products, Monarch consistently created solutions that worked for a broader range of users. The company's growth had been meteoric, and by its 15th year, Monarch Enterprises had become a household name with offices in 12 countries. Now Isaiah was looking for strategic acquisitions to expand Monarch's market reach even further. His team had identified several potential targets, but one particularly caught his attention. Whitfield Industries, a Boston-based company with a century of history and a breakthrough innovation in quantum computing that could revolutionize Monarch's offerings. Despite its impressive technology, Whitfield Industries was struggling financially. Their innovation had cost a fortune to develop, and they lacked the resources to bring it to market effectively. A partnership with Monarch could save them from bankruptcy while providing Isaiah's company with a technological edge over competitors. The deal made perfect sense on paper, a billion-dollar acquisition that would benefit both parties. But Isaiah had learned through bitter experience that business wasn't conducted on paper. It was conducted by people. And people with all their prejudices and biases could derail even the most logical business arrangement. I want to vet the Whitfield family personally before we move forward, Isaiah told his chief financial officer, Layla Patel. We've had too many deals fall apart because we've partnered with people who couldn't see past the color of my skin. Layla nodded, understanding completely. Just last year, Monarch had walked away from a promising merger when the CEO of the other company repeatedly made microaggressive comments during negotiations. The financial press had criticized Isaiah for being too sensitive, but he knew that any partnership built on disrespect was doomed to fail. That's why Isaiah made an unusual decision. He would attend a charity gala where the Whitfield family was scheduled to appear, working undercover as a waiter to observe their true character before revealing himself as the CEO. Considering their acquisition proposal, some might call it deceptive, Isaiah told Michael, now his chief operating officer. I call it due diligence. I need to see how they treat people when they don't think it matters. That tells me far more than how they'll behave in a boardroom when $1 billion is on the line. As he adjusted his waiter's uniform in the mirror of the Boston Harbor Hotel's staff bathroom, Isaiah had no idea that this evening would indeed reveal the Whitfield's true colors and change the trajectory of multiple lives in ways no one could have predicted. The Whitfield name had been synonymous with Boston aristocracy for over a century. Their fortune, originally made in shipping during the 1800s and later diversified into manufacturing and technology, had survived economic depressions, world wars, and technological revolutions. The family's Beacon Hill mansion, with its brick facade and black shutters, stood as a symbol of old money and entrenched privilege. But appearances can be deceiving. Behind the imposing gates and perfectly manicured gardens, the Whitfield dynasty was facing its greatest crisis yet. Harrison Whitfield, at 67, bore the distinguished look of Boston Brahmin society with his silver hair and tailored suits. As the third-generation patriarch of Whitfield Industries, he had expanded the company into new technologies in the 1,990 seconds, a gamble that had initially paid off handsomely. However, his conservative approach to business had gradually become a liability in the fast-moving tech landscape. The quarterly numbers are worse than projected, Harrison muttered, reviewing financial documents in his mahogany-paneled home office. The company's cash reserves were dangerously low, and the breakthrough in quantum computing, the project he'd bet everything on, was still months away from commercial viability. Without an injection of capital, Whitfield Industries would be insolvent before the technology could save them. The potential acquisition by Monarch Enterprises represented salvation. $1 billion would not only rescue the company, but would allow their quantum computing innovation to reach its full potential with Monarch's resources and market reach. We simply must make a good impression tomorrow, Harrison said, looking up as his wife Eleanor entered the room. At 62, Eleanor Whitfield maintained the regal bearing and immaculate appearance expected of her position. Her blonde hair, now assisted by the finest colorist in Boston, was styled in a perfect bob. Her clothes were exclusively designer, her jewelry always tasteful yet unmistakably expensive. She was the product of 7 generations of privilege raised to believe that social status was the most valuable currency of all. "I've selected my outfit for the meeting," Eleanor replied, sipping from a crystal glass of white wine. "The Chanel suit, I think. Professional yet appropriate for our standing." Harrison sighed. "This isn't about standing, Eleanor. It's about survival. Monarch Enterprises doesn't care about our family history or social connections. They care about our technology and whether we're worth the investment." Eleanor's perfectly shaped eyebrows arched slightly. "Well, I've done my research on this, Isaiah Washington. New money, of course. From Harlem, of all places. Quite the rags to riches story." She said this as if describing an exotic specimen. "I suppose we must adapt to the changing times, but really, Harrison, couldn't you have found a more traditional buyer?" Before Harrison could respond, their daughter Alexandra entered the room. At 35, she was the antithesis of her mother in many ways. While equally educated at the finest institutions, Phillips Exeter Academy, then Yale, Alexandra had developed a worldview that frequently put her at odds with her parents, especially her mother. "I hope you're not still stuck on traditional," Mother Alexandra said, her tone making clear what she thought of that particular code word. "Monarch is exactly the partner we need. Their technical expertise and market position are perfect complements to our quantum computing platform." As Chief Operating Officer of Whitfield Industries, Alexandra had been pushing for modernization for years, often clashing with her father's cautious approach and her mother's obsession with maintaining the appearance of success, rather than adapting to achieve actual success. "I'm well aware of Monarch's business credentials," Eleanor replied coolly. "I was merely commenting on the unusual background of its founder." Alexandra fixed her mother with a steady gaze. "His unusual background includes MIT and Harvard Business School, mother, and building a $50 billion company from scratch. I'd say that's precisely the kind of innovative thinking we need." Harrison cleared his throat, uncomfortable as always when tension arose between his wife and daughter. "The gala tonight is an opportunity for us to demonstrate that we're still a force in Boston society. The meeting tomorrow is when we'll focus on business. Let's try to keep those separate, shall we?" The Whitfield family would be attending the annual Children's Hospital benefit at the Boston Harbor Hotel that evening. Though Harrison had considered skipping it given their financial situation, tables cost $25,000, Eleanor had insisted they maintain appearances. "If people sense weakness, they'll pounce," she had argued. "We must act as if nothing is amiss." As the family's driver navigated through Boston's evening traffic toward the hotel, Harrison turned to his wife. "Eleanor, I need you to be on your absolute best behavior tonight. The business community is small. Word gets around. We cannot afford any incidents." Eleanor bristled. "I don't know what you're implying, Harrison." "I think you do," he responded quietly. "The situation last year with the Chen's daughter at the Symphony Gala, your comments at the MFA fundraiser about the Diaz family. These things get remembered." "I merely stated facts," Eleanor sniffed. "If people choose to be offended by reality, that's hardly my concern." Alexandra, sitting across from her parents, intervened. "Mother, what Dad is trying to say is that we need this deal with Monarch. Without it, Whitfield Industries will be bankrupt within 6 months. Every employee will lose their job. Our family will lose everything. So please, just for tonight and tomorrow, be mindful of what you say and how you treat people." Eleanor looked out the window, her profile rigid with indignation. "Fine," she said finally. "I'll be the soul of discretion. But I won't apologize for upholding standards." Some of us still remember when that meant something in this city. As their car pulled up to the red carpet entrance of the Boston Harbor Hotel, Harrison offered a silent prayer that the evening would pass without incident. Tomorrow's meeting with Isaiah Washington was too important to jeopardize. Little did he know that the CEO of Monarch Enterprises was already inside the hotel, watching and waiting for the Whitfields to reveal their true selves. Isaiah Washington moved efficiently through the grand ballroom of the Boston Harbor Hotel. A silver tray of champagne flutes balanced perfectly on his palm. After 15 years as a CEO, the muscle memory of his college waiter days had returned surprisingly quickly. The Children's Hospital benefit was in full swing, the cream of Boston society, dressed in their finest diamonds, and conversation sparkling under crystal chandeliers. Though Isaiah had attended countless such events as a guest, the perspective from the service side was illuminating. Some guests looked through him as if he were invisible. Others were performatively over-polite in ways that still managed to be condescending. And then there were the Whitfields, who had arrived 30 minutes ago and settled at table 11 near the center of the room. Isaiah had been observing them carefully. Harrison Whitfield seemed distracted, checking his phone frequently and engaging only superficially with others at his table. Eleanor Whitfield, by contrast, held court like a queen, her laugh a bit too loud, her wine glass never empty for long. But it was Alexandra Whitfield who most interested Isaiah. Unlike her parents, she seemed genuinely engaged with everyone she spoke to, including the waitstaff. When Isaiah had served their table earlier, she had looked him in the eye, thanked him by name after reading his badge, and ensured her purse wasn't blocking his access to the table. Small things, perhaps, but revealing. As the evening progressed, Isaiah continued his careful observation while seamlessly performing his waiter duties. His surveillance confirmed his initial impressions. Harrison was clearly anxious about something, likely the company's financial situation and tomorrow's meeting. Eleanor became increasingly imperious as she consumed more wine, speaking loudly about people at other tables and repeatedly snapping her fingers to summon service. Alexandra, meanwhile, appeared to be running interference, smoothing over her mother's rudeness and steering conversations away from potentially inflammatory topics. At one point, Isaiah overheard a particularly telling exchange as he cleared plates from a nearby table. The problem with these tech companies, Eleanor was saying, her words slightly slurred, is that they have no sense of history or propriety. New money never does. They think because they've made a fortune from some computer program, they belong in the same rooms as families who've built this city over generations. Harrison cleared his throat. Eleanor, perhaps this isn't the venue for... I'm simply stating facts, Harrison, she interrupted. This Washington person from Monarch Harlem, for God's sake, probably doesn't even know which fork to use for the fish course. Yet we're supposed to hand over our company to him. A company my great-grandfather founded. Alexandra leaned in her voice, low but intense. Mother Isaiah Washington built a $50 billion company from nothing. He has degrees from MIT and Harvard. And most importantly, he's offering to save our company when no one else will. So yes, we're handing over our company to him because the alternative is watching it collapse entirely. Eleanor waved her hand dismissively, nearly knocking over her wine glass. These people always overestimate their importance. They need old names like ours for legitimacy. He needs us more than we need him. Isaiah, moving to the next table, filed this information away carefully. The family dynamics were exactly as he'd suspected. Harrison desperate but conflict-averse, Eleanor deeply prejudiced, and Alexandra progressive but caught in the middle. It reinforced his instinct that any deal would need to be structured to minimize Eleanor's involvement. The deciding moment came shortly after the dessert course was served. Isaiah was carrying a tray of filled wine glasses for another table when a clearly intoxicated guest stumbled backward into his path. Executing a nimble sidestep that prevented a collision, Isaiah found himself momentarily off balance near the Whitfield's table. His tray tilted slightly, and while no wine spilled, he did lightly bump against Eleanor Whitfield's arm. "Excuse me, ma'am. Isaiah said immediately. "I apologize for the contact." Eleanor turned her eyes narrowing as she looked him up and down. What happened next occurred so quickly that many guests later disagreed about the sequence of events. Eleanor reached for her half-full wine glass and, with deliberate precision, stood and poured its contents directly onto Isaiah's white shirt and black vest. "Perhaps that will teach you to watch where you're going," she said, voice pitched to Carrie. "People like you need to learn your place." The surrounding tables fell silent. Alexandra gasped. Harrison half rose from his chair, face ashen. Mother Alexandra exclaimed in horror. But Eleanor wasn't finished. She leaned closer to Isaiah and whispered something only he could hear. "Should have stayed in your ghetto, boy." The crystal glass slipped from her fingers accidentally or intentionally, no one could be sure, and shattered on the marble floor. Isaiah stood perfectly still, red wine dripping from his clothes. His expression remained composed, almost eerily calm. He reached for his pocket square, wiped his face slowly, then looked directly at Eleanor. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said, his voice quiet, but carrying in the hushed room, "I don't believe we've been formally introduced. My name is Isaiah Washington, CEO of Monarch Enterprises." He removed his waiter's bow tie and name badge. "I make it a practice to observe potential business partners in their natural environment before committing to major deals. I find it reveals character in ways that boardroom meetings cannot." Eleanor's face transformed from smug satisfaction to horror as the implications sank in. Around them, guests began to whisper and point. "I'm afraid Monarch Enterprises will have to reconsider your family's proposal." Isaiah continued his dignity, in stark contrast to Eleanor's rapidly crumbling composure, all $1 billion of it. Harrison Whitfield looked as if he might collapse. Alexandra covered her mouth with her hand, eyes wide with shock and dismay. "Mr. Washington, please." Harrison began, finally finding his voice. "My wife has had too much to drink. She doesn't." "Represent your family's values," Isaiah finished for him. "That hasn't been my observation this evening, Mr. Whitfield, but I appreciate your concern." With a slight nod to the stunned family, Isaiah turned and walked calmly toward the exit, leaving silence and the scattered pieces of Eleanor's crystal glass behind him. The grand ballroom of the Boston Harbor Hotel had fallen into a state of stunned silence that seemed to stretch for eternity. The orchestra, unaware of the drama unfolding, continued playing a light classical piece that now felt jarringly inappropriate against the backdrop of destruction. All eyes were fixed on the Whitfield table, where the family tableau told the entire story. Eleanor, frozen in place, her hand still outstretched where she had held the now shattered wine glass. Harrison, half standing, his face drained of color. Alexandra, with her head in her hands, the picture of absolute mortification. Then, as if a spell had been broken, the room erupted into hushed whispers. Phones were discreetly removed from evening bags and jacket pockets as Boston's elite began spreading the news throughout their networks. Harrison was the first to recover quickly, moving to damage control mode. He hurried after Isaiah, catching up to him near the coat check. "Mr. Washington, please," Harrison said, slightly out of breath. "What my wife did was inexcusable, but I beg you not to judge our entire company by her behavior." Isaiah turned, his expression composed despite the red wine staining his white shirt. "Mr. Whitfield, in my experience, company culture flows from the top. The values demonstrated by leadership or their family typically permeate the entire organization." "Eleanor doesn't have any role in our company operations," Harrison insisted desperately. "And what she said, she's from a different generation. Please, the jobs of hundreds of employees are at stake." Isaiah regarded him thoughtfully. "I'm well aware of the stakes, Mr. Whitfield. That's precisely why I take such care in selecting our business partners. A billion-dollar acquisition isn't just a transaction. It's a marriage of values and vision." Before Harrison could respond further, they were interrupted by the arrival of the event. Security and staff manager both looking deeply concerned. Mr. Washington, the manager, began his tone apologetic. "I've just been informed of the incident. Please allow us to express our deepest apologies. Mrs. Whitfield will be asked to leave immediately." Isaiah noted how the manager's demeanor had completely transformed once he realized Isaiah wasn't actually a waiter, but a billionaire CEO. The differential treatment was all too familiar. "That won't be necessary," Isaiah replied. "I was just leaving. And Mr. Whitfield, I believe we have nothing further to discuss tonight." As Isaiah collected his coat and made his way to the exit, he pulled out his phone and dialed Layla Patel, his CFO. "Layla, we need to reassess the Whitfield acquisition immediately," he said as he stepped into the cool Boston night. "Gather the executive team for an emergency call in 30 minutes. Back in the ballroom, security had indeed approached the Whitfield table, though, with the deference accorded to major donors rather than the firmness they might have shown to less prestigious guests. "Mrs. Whitfield, perhaps it would be best if your family retired for the evening," the security manager suggested quietly. Eleanor had recovered enough of her composure to affect indignation. "This is absurd. It was an accident, and that server was incredibly rude." Mother Alexandra hissed, finally breaking her shocked silence. That server was Isaiah Washington, the CEO of Monarch Enterprises, the man who was going to save our company tomorrow. And you just destroyed any chance of that happening. The reality of the situation was finally beginning to penetrate Eleanor's alcohol-infused haze. Her face paled beneath her perfect makeup. "I had no idea," she stammered. "Harrison, you must fix this. Call him immediately." Harrison's shoulders slumped in defeat. "It's too late, Eleanor. You saw his face. That deal is dead." As the Whitfields made their humiliating exit, escorted discreetly through a side door to avoid further public scrutiny, the other guests watched with the barely concealed delight of witnessing a social downfall. Already, the incident was being documented in text messages and social media posts that would reach every corner of Boston's business community before morning. The family ride home was conducted in icy silence, broken only when they reached the safety of their Beacon Hill mansion. "How could you do this to us?" Harrison exploded the moment the front door closed behind them. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Any concept of the consequences?" Eleanor removed her wrap, handing it mechanically to their waiting housekeeper. "Don't be dramatic, Harrison. I'll write him an apology note tomorrow. This will all blow over." Alexandra stared at her mother in disbelief. "Blow over, Mother? You poured wine on the CEO of a $50 billion company while using a racial slur. There is no blowing over from this. You've just bankrupted our family business." "I did no such thing," Eleanor protested, though her voice lacked conviction. "And I certainly didn't use any inappropriate language." "I was sitting right there," Alexandra countered. "I heard exactly what you whispered to him, and judging by his face, so did he." Meanwhile, across town at the Four Seasons Hotel, Isaiah had assembled his executive team virtually. Michael Chen, Layla Patel, and the other key decision makers appeared on his laptop screen as he explained the evening's events. "So that's the situation," Isaiah concluded. "I've seen enough to know that the Whitfield acquisition would be problematic regardless of their technology's potential." The team's reactions were mixed. Layla, ever focused on the financial implications, looked troubled. "Isaiah, I understand your position, but the quantum computing technology they've developed could put us years ahead of competitors. Perhaps we could structure the deal to remove the family from operations entirely." Michael, who had been with Isaiah from the beginning, shook his head. "The Whitfield name is on the building. Their family has been running that company for a century. Their values are baked into its DNA. I say we walk away completely." The debate continued for over an hour, with valid points raised on both sides. The technology was indeed groundbreaking. The market opportunity was significant. But the cultural fit was non-existent, and Isaiah had learned through bitter experience that culture ultimately determined success or failure. As the call concluded, Isaiah sat alone in his hotel room considering his options. His phone buzzed with an incoming email. It was a formal apology letter from Harrison Whitfield, filled with expressions of regret and assurances that Eleanor's behavior didn't reflect the company's values. A moment later, a second email arrived. This one was from Alexandra Whitfield, sent from her personal email rather than her company account. Unlike her father's corporate apology, Alexandra's note was brief, direct, and personal. "Mr. Washington," she wrote, "I won't insult you by offering excuses for my mother's inexcusable behavior. Instead, I'd like to propose an alternative path forward that separates the valuable technology from the problematic family dynamics. I believe there's still a way for both our companies to benefit. Would you be willing to meet with me alone tomorrow morning?" Isaiah read the email twice, considering. There was something about Alexandra that set her apart from her parents, a genuineness he had observed throughout the evening, and her business acumen was evident in how she had managed the crisis as it unfolded. Against his team's advice, Isaiah decided to hear her out. He replied with a simple message: coffee at 8 a.m., the small cafe on Newbury Street called Thinking Cup. Come alone. What do you think about Isaiah's decision to meet with Alexandra? If you think he's making a smart choice, giving her a chance, comment 1 below. If you think he should have completely cut ties with the entire Whitfield family, comment 2. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories about consequences and redemption. Also, what would you have done if you were in Isaiah's position? Would you have publicly called out Eleanor right there at the gala? Or handled it with the calm dignity that Isaiah showed? Let me know in the comments. Now let's see what happened next in this billion-dollar family drama. By 9 o'clock the following morning, the story had spread through Boston's business community like wildfire. What had begun as whispered gossip among gala attendees had transformed into headline news when a financial blog published the first account of the incident. Whitfield acquisition deal in jeopardy after social gaffe read the headline, "A masterpiece of understatement," that did little to disguise the racial component of the confrontation. By 10 o'clock, mainstream business publications had picked up the story with increasingly less diplomatic headlines. By noon, Whitfield Industries stock had plummeted 27%, as investors reacted to news that the Monarch acquisition, which many had been counting on, was likely dead. Isaiah Washington's executive assistant fielded dozens of calls from reporters seeking comment while Monarch's public relations team crafted a carefully worded statement that neither confirmed nor denied the incident, emphasized the company's commitment to ethical business practices and respectful partnerships. At 2 o'clock, the other shoe dropped. Monarch Enterprises officially announced its withdrawal from acquisition talks with Whitfield Industries. The press release was brief and non-specific about reasons, but the timing left little doubt about the connection to the previous night's events. Whitfield Industries stock immediately fell another 15%, triggering trading circuit breakers. Financial analysts began openly discussing the probability of bankruptcy for the century-old company. Inside the Whitfield mansion, the family was in crisis mode. "This is a disaster," Harrison said, pacing the living room with his phone clutched in his hand. "Our board is calling an emergency meeting. Major shareholders are demanding explanations. Our legal team says we could face lawsuits for failing to disclose how precarious the acquisition talks were." Eleanor sat rigidly on the sofa, still in her dressing gown despite the late hour. "I've already sent a formal apology," she said, her voice hollow. "What more do they want?" "What more?" Harrison rounded on her decades of suppressed anger, finally breaking through his usual reserve. "They want the $1 billion we just lost. They want the 5 generations of hard work that you flushed down the drain with a glass of Merlot. They want their jobs, their retirement funds, their children's college tuitions that were all..." tied up in our company's success." Eleanor flinched as if he had struck her. In 38 years of marriage, Harrison had never raised his voice to her. "You've never understood what was at stake," he continued, his voice shaking. "You've lived in a bubble of privilege so complete that you genuinely believe your social standing matters more than the livelihoods of hundreds of families. Well, congratulations, Eleanor. You've finally managed to destroy everything my family built." The front door opened and closed with a quiet click as Alexandra returned home. She entered the living room, looking exhausted but strangely resolute. "It's official then?" she asked, though she clearly already knew the answer. "Monarch has pulled out." Harrison nodded, collapsing into an armchair. "It's over. Without that deal, we'll be insolvent within months. The board will likely move to sell off assets to repay creditors. The Whitfield name will be synonymous with failure instead of innovation." Alexandra took a deep breath. "Maybe not. I may have an alternative solution." Both parents looked at her with varying degrees of hope and skepticism. "I met with Isaiah Washington this morning," she revealed, "privately at a cafe in Back Bay. You did what Eleanor sat up straight, indignation momentarily overriding her despair. Without consulting us, without proper representation. Alexandra, how could you be so foolish?" Alexandra fixed her mother with a cold stare. "Given that you're the reason we're in this mess, I don't think you're in a position to criticize my attempts to salvage something from the wreckage." She turned to her father. "I've proposed spinning off the quantum computing division as a separate entity. New name, new management, new corporate culture. I would lead it with no involvement from either of you or the current Whitfield Industries board." Harrison frowned, processing this information. "But the technology is our only valuable asset. Without it, what's left of Whitfield Industries? The real estate holdings, the legacy manufacturing divisions, the Whitfield name for whatever that's still worth," Alexandra replied candidly. "It would be a much smaller company, but it might survive in some form. And this spin-off company," Eleanor said, her lips barely moving. "Would Monarch acquire it?" "Potentially." Isaiah was understandably skeptical, but he recognized the value of the technology. He's willing to consider a much smaller deal focused solely on the innovation and the team that developed it, completely separate from the Whitfield family name and influence. Harrison rubbed his forehead, trying to absorb this dramatic shift in circumstances. How much smaller a deal? Alexandra hesitated. 100 million instead of 1 billion. The silence that followed was deafening. 1/10 of the original offer. A lifeline, certainly, but a humbling one. "He's punishing us," Eleanor finally said. "This is vindictive." Alexandra's patience, already stretched thin, finally snapped. "No, Mother, this is consequences. Isaiah Washington doesn't owe us anything, especially after how you treated him." The fact that he's willing to consider any deal at all shows remarkable professionalism and grace. She paused, then continued more calmly. "And to be clear, he's not offering this to help us. He's interested in the technology and the team that created it. Period. The deal would be structured so that Whitfield Industries receives a one-time payment, but no ongoing relationship with the new entity." Harrison nodded slowly, his businessman's mind already calculating what this would mean for the company's debts and obligations. It's not enough to save everything, but it might prevent complete collapse. "We could sell some assets, restructure the debt." "And what about us?" Eleanor interjected. "Where does this leave the family?" Alexandra's expression was somber. "We'd have to sell the house, the vacation properties too, the art collection, basically everything that isn't legally protected in your personal trusts. It would be enough to live comfortably, but not like this." She gestured at their surroundings, the opulent mansion that had been in the family for generations. Eleanor's face crumpled. The social implications, the whispers, the pity, the fall from grace seemed to hit her harder than the financial reality. "I need to think," Harrison said, standing abruptly. "Alexandra, send me the details of your proposal. I'll need to discuss this with the board." As he left the room, Alexandra turned to her mother. "I hope you understand what's happening here. I'm trying to salvage something from this disaster, but make no mistake, everything is changing. And it's time for you to change too, or you'll lose more than just your social standing." Eleanor looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but defiant. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm done enabling your behavior. The world is different now, Mother. The attitudes you cling to, the casual prejudice you think is your birthright, they're not just morally wrong, they're now financially devastating as well. If you want me to fight for this family's future, you need to recognize that your actions have consequences." With that, Alexandra left her mother alone with the shattered pieces of the life she had taken for granted. Meanwhile, across town, Isaiah sat in his hotel suite with his executive team considering Alexandra's proposal. "The technology is still valuable," Layla pointed out, "and Alexandra Whitfield seems to genuinely understand both its potential and the importance of corporate culture. If she's truly willing to break away from her family's influence." Michael remained skeptical. "It's a big risk. The Whitfield name is toxic now, especially in tech circles. And can we really believe the daughter is so different from the parents?" Isaiah thought back to his observations of Alexandra throughout the gala and their conversation that morning. Her horror at her mother's behavior had been genuine, her business proposal solid. Her willingness to separate herself from her family's legacy showed courage and integrity. "People should be judged on their own actions," Isaiah said finally. "Alexandra Whitfield is not her mother, and the technology really is groundbreaking." He made his decision. "We'll make a counteroffer for the quantum division only. 100 million contingent on complete separation from Whitfield, Industries' new branding, and Alexandra as CEO with full autonomy. If they accept these terms, we'll move forward cautiously." As his team began working on the details, Isaiah received a notification on his phone. The financial press had gotten wind of Alexandra's visit to the cafe that morning. Speculation was already swirling about a potential salvage deal. The business world was watching closely to see what would emerge from the ashes of last night's social catastrophe. What none of them yet realized was that the Whitfield family itself might not survive intact regardless of the business outcome. The Whitfield mansion had never felt colder. Despite the spring warmth outside, a glacial atmosphere had settled over the once happy home. Harrison and Eleanor moved through the rooms like ghosts, avoiding each other when possible, exchanging only terse necessities when not. 3 days had passed since Alexandra's meeting with Isaiah Washington. 3 days of intense negotiations, board meetings, and legal consultations. 3 days of watching their family legacy disintegrate in slow motion. Harrison had aged visibly. The strain of fighting for his company's survival while processing his wife's role in its downfall had etched new lines into his face. He spent most of his time locked in his study, emerging only for more coffee or stronger drinks as the day progressed. Eleanor had retreated into denial, maintaining her social calendar as if nothing had happened. She attended her garden club meeting, had lunch at the country club, and kept her hair appointment, all while ignoring the whispers and sudden silences that greeted her appearance. "Did you see how Marjorie Cabot practically ran to the ladies' room to avoid sitting with me?" Eleanor complained as she swept into the house after her bridge game. "After 30 years of friendship, as if I'm somehow contagious." Harrison looked up from his laptop, where he'd been reviewing the latest draft of the asset sale agreement. "People don't want to be associated with failure, Eleanor. Surely you, of all people, understand that." The barb hit its mark. Eleanor's expression hardened. "This temporary setback hardly constitutes failure, Harrison. The Whitfields have weathered worse." "Have we?" he asked wearily. "The Great Depression didn't break us. 2 world wars didn't break us. But apparently, your inability to treat people with basic human dignity has succeeded." where global catastrophes failed. Before Eleanor could respond, the front door opened and Alexandra entered. Unlike her parents, she appeared energized, focused, though the dark circles under her eyes testified to the long hours she'd been working. "The revised term sheet just came through from Monarch," she announced, without preamble. "The board has called an emergency session for tomorrow morning to vote on it." Harrison straightened. "And what are the terms?" $100 million for the quantum division, all intellectual property, and the development team. Structured as a complete separation with no ongoing Whitfield involvement except for my role as CEO of the new entity. $100 million, Eleanor repeated, as if tasting something bitter, when we were discussing $1 billion just last week. Alexandra's patience, already worn thin, snapped completely. "Yes, Mother. That's the cost of your social gaffe, as the papers so delicately put it. $900 million. And the end of our family's legacy. I hope whatever momentary satisfaction you got from putting that server in his place was worth it." Eleanor flinched, then rallied. "I don't appreciate your tone, Alexandra. I've already apologized to Mr. Washington in writing. What more could possibly be expected?" Alexandra stared at her mother in disbelief. "Expected? How about genuine remorse? How about some recognition that your behavior was inexcusable? How about acknowledging that your deep-seated prejudice just destroyed 100 years of family history?" "That is quite enough," Eleanor said sharply. "I will not be lectured on propriety by my own daughter." "Propriety?" Alexandra laughed a harsh sound, devoid of humor. "You think this is about etiquette? This is about your fundamental inability to see people who don't look like you or come from your background as fully human." Harrison intervened, his voice tired. "No, Dad, we're long past helping, but maybe it's time for some honesty." Alexandra turned back to her mother. "This isn't an isolated incident, and we all know it. Remember Mrs. Jen at the Symphony Gala. Your helpful suggestion that she learn English better before attending such events, despite the fact that she's a concert pianist who speaks 4 languages. Eleanor's cheeks flushed. "I was simply..." Or Maria Diaz at the hospital fundraiser. You asked if she was there to collect the coats when she's the chief of neurosurgery. A simple misunderstanding. "It's never been a misunderstanding," Mother Alexandra cut in. "It's been a pattern throughout my entire life. I've watched you judge, dismiss, and dehumanize people based on their skin color, accent, or last name. I've made excuses for you, smoothed things over, apologized behind your back. But I'm done." She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I'm accepting the position with the new company. I'll be moving out of this house and severing my ties with Whitfield Industries completely." A heavy silence fell. Even Eleanor seemed momentarily at a loss for words. Harrison finally broke the silence. "Alexandra, I understand you're upset, but this is still your family. Is it?" Alexandra challenged. "Because a family should make you better, not complicit in the worst parts of yourself. For years, I've compromised my own values to keep the peace. I've stayed silent when I should have spoken up. I've let things slide that should never be acceptable." She looked directly at her mother. "I thought you could change, that eventually you'd recognize how damaging your attitudes are. But you can't even acknowledge what you've done, much less try to make amends." Eleanor's face had gone from flushed to pale. Something in her daughter's words seemed to finally penetrate her defenses. "Alexandra, surely you're overreacting. I admit I behaved poorly at the gala, but to throw away your inheritance, your name..." "My name is exactly the problem," Alexandra interrupted. "As long as I carry the Whitfield name, I'll be associated with the values you represent. And I can no longer bear that burden." She turned to her father. "The board will almost certainly accept Monarch's offer. It's the only viable path forward. Once the papers are signed, Phoenix Technology will be established as an independent entity under Monarch's umbrella, Phoenix Harrison repeated softly, rising from the ashes. Alexandra nodded. Exactly. A new beginning without the weight of the past. Eleanor suddenly seemed to grasp the finality of what was happening. You can't simply walk away from your family, Alexandra. Where would you go? What would you do for money until this Phoenix venture actually generates revenue?
I've already found an apartment in Cambridge, Alexandra, replied calmly, and I've been saving my own money for years. I'll be fine.
She gathered her coat and purse, preparing to leave.
I have another meeting with Isaiah and his team to prepare for tomorrow's board presentation. I won't be home for dinner.
As she reached the door, she turned back one last time. Dad, you have a choice to make. Mom will never change because she doesn't believe she's done anything wrong. But you've always known better. You've just chosen the path of least resistance. Now you need to decide what kind of person you want to be for whatever years you have left. With that, she was gone, leaving her parents in stunned silence. Harrison looked at his wife, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in decades. The beautiful socialite he had married had hardened into something unrecognizable, or perhaps she had always been this way and he had simply chosen not to see it. She's right, he said quietly. I've enabled you, excused you, looked the other way, and now I've lost my daughter and my company because of it. Eleanor's expression shifted from shock to anger. So you're taking her side, after everything we've built together. That's just it, Eleanor. What have we really built? A facade of respectability, hiding a rot of prejudice and entitlement. A fortune that will now be dismantled to pay our debts. A family that's falling apart because I lacked the courage to stand up for what's right. He moved toward the door. Where are you going? Eleanor demanded. Harrison paused his hand on the doorknob. To find out if it's too late to be the kind of father Alexandra deserves, and the kind of man I should have been all along. As the door closed behind him, Eleanor Whitfield found herself truly alone for the first time in her carefully curated life, surrounded by the trappings of wealth and privilege that had suddenly lost their meaning. And in that moment, the first glimmer of doubt began to crack her certainty that the world was wrong and she was right. But was this moment of reckoning too little too late? The damage had been done and the consequences were still unfolding. The Thinking Cup Cafe on Newbury Street was nearly empty at 3 in the afternoon, the lull between lunch and the after-work crowd providing a bubble of privacy in the otherwise busy Back Bay district. Isaiah Washington sat at a corner table nursing an Americano while reviewing the latest revisions to the Phoenix Technology proposal on his tablet. The bell above the door chimed, and he looked up to see Alexandra Whitfield enter. Unlike their previous meeting where she had appeared composed but clearly stressed, today she moved with purpose and confidence. She spotted him immediately and made her way to his table. "Thank you for agreeing to meet again," she said, settling into the chair across from him, "especially given everything." Isaiah set aside his tablet. "Your proposal is sound. The technology is valuable. That hasn't changed, regardless of family drama." A brief smile touched Alexandra's lips, at his businesslike tone so different from the emotional chaos she'd been navigating. "I appreciate that perspective. Though I think we both know family drama is a rather mild way of describing what happened." The barista approached and Alexandra ordered a simple black coffee. When they were alone again, she leaned forward. "I want to be completely transparent with you, Mr. Washington. After our last meeting, I went home and confronted my parents. It didn't go well." Isaiah's expression remained neutral, though his eyes were attentive. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Don't be," she replied, with surprising candor. "It was long overdue. The point is, I've made my decision. I'm severing my ties with Whitfield Industries completely beyond what's necessary to complete this transaction. I've moved out of the family home. I've even She hesitated. I'm even considering legally changing my name once Phoenix is established. This caught Isaiah's attention. That's a significant step. Alexandra nodded. It is, but I believe it's necessary both personally and professionally. The Whitfield name would be a liability for Phoenix, especially in the tech world. More importantly, I need to make a clean break from values I cannot condone. She took a sip of her coffee, gathering her thoughts. Mr. Washington, I know you have every reason to be skeptical about working with anyone connected to my family. But I believe in what Phoenix could become, not just technologically, but culturally. A truly innovative company built on respect, inclusion, and merit rather than privilege and tradition. Isaiah studied her for a long moment. In his 15 years as CEO, he had developed a keen ability to assess character. Alexandra Whitfield, or whatever name she might choose, struck him as genuinely committed to breaking the cycle of prejudice she had been raised in. Call me Isaiah, he said finally. If we're going to be partners in this venture, formality will only slow us down. The tension in Alexandra's shoulders eased slightly. Thank you, Isaiah. And please call me Alex. Alexandra feels too connected to my past at this point. Isaiah nodded, then shifted back to business. Let's talk specifics. The revised term sheet offers $100 million for the quantum computing division, all related IP, and the entire development team. Monarch would be the majority shareholder, but Phoenix would operate as an independent entity under your leadership. With certain ethical conditions, Alex added, showing she had read the fine print carefully. Yes. Mandatory diversity and inclusion initiatives. Regular cultural assessments. A board of directors with at least 50% representation from minority backgrounds. Isaiah's expression was unapologetic. Those points are non-negotiable. They won't need to be negotiated, Alex replied firmly. They align perfectly with the company I want to build. She pulled out her own tablet, opening a document. I've actually drafted some additional measures I'd like to implement, including paid internship programs for underrepresented groups, in tech partnerships, with schools in disadvantaged communities, and transparency in pay scales to prevent discrimination. Isaiah took the tablet, scanning her proposals with growing interest. They were thoughtful, substantive, and showed a genuine understanding of the systemic issues in the tech industry. These are excellent, he said, genuinely impressed. I'd like to incorporate them into our agreement. Alex nodded, clearly pleased. There's one more thing. I know there are concerns about public relations issues given my family connection. I'm prepared to make a public statement, acknowledging what happened, and making it clear that Phoenix represents a complete break from those attitudes. Isaiah considered this carefully. That could be a double-edged sword. It might address the issue directly, but it would also keep the incident in the public eye longer. I believe in facing things head-on, Alex replied. Sweeping problems under the rug only allows them to fester. If Phoenix is going to truly represent a new beginning, it needs to acknowledge the flawed foundation it's breaking away from. Isaiah found himself respecting her approach. Too many companies tried to rebrand without addressing underlying issues, resulting in superficial changes that didn't last. All right, he agreed. But let's work with our PR teams to frame it carefully. The goal should be to establish Phoenix's values, not just respond to controversy. They spent the next hour discussing technical aspects of the deal, transition timelines, employee retention strategies, integration of the quantum technology with Monarch's existing platforms. Isaiah was increasingly impressed with Alex's grasp of both the business and technical elements. She had clearly been the driving force behind the innovation at Whitfield Industries, despite her parents' more traditional approach. As they wrapped up, Isaiah asked the question that had been at the back of his mind throughout their meeting. Why quantum computing? It's an unusual focus for a company with Whitfield's traditional manufacturing background. Alex's eyes lit up with genuine passion. because it has the potential to solve problems we can't even approach with classical computing. Climate modeling that could help us address global warming. Drug discovery accelerated by decades. Optimization of resources to address inequality and scarcity. She continued, her hands animating her words. My parents never really understood. They saw the financial potential but missed the bigger picture. Technology should serve humanity's greatest needs, not just generate profit for shareholders. Isaiah nodded, feeling a growing certainty that this partnership, despite its unusual beginnings, might be exactly what both of them needed. One final question, he said. Your family has been the sole owner of Whitfield Industries for generations. Are you truly prepared to be answerable to a board, to shareholders, to partners who may challenge your decisions? Alex met his gaze directly. Isaiah, I've spent my entire life navigating my mother's iron control and my father's conflict avoidance. I've learned to stand my ground when necessary and compromise when appropriate. I don't want the isolation of absolute authority. I want the strength that comes from diverse perspectives and collaborative problem solving. She leaned forward, and frankly, I'd rather answer to a board that challenges me on the merits of my ideas than inherit a kingdom built on prejudice and privilege. Isaiah extended his hand across the table. Then, I believe we have a deal. The board votes tomorrow, but with my recommendation and your presentation, I expect it to pass. As they shook hands, Alex asked, why did you give me this chance? After what my mother did, you could have walked away completely. No one would have blamed you. Isaiah considered the question carefully. Because judging an entire organization or a person based on the worst behavior of those associated with them is exactly the kind of thinking I've fought against my whole career. You deserve to be evaluated on your own merits. He gathered his things, preparing to leave. Besides the look on your face, when your mother poured that wine, told me everything I needed to know about your character. Horror, yes, but also recognition, like you were seeing clearly something you'd been trying not to see for a long time. Alex nodded slowly. That's exactly what it was. A moment when I couldn't pretend anymore that her behavior was just generational or occasionally inappropriate. I had to face that it was fundamentally wrong, and that my silence made me complicit. And that recognition, Isaiah said as they walked to the door, is the first step toward creating real change in yourself and in the world around you. Outside, they parted ways. Isaiah back to his hotel to prepare for the board meeting. Alex to her new apartment in Cambridge to continue her preparations for tomorrow's presentation. Both carried with them a sense that something significant had been set in motion, something that transcended business deals and technology. A transformation that would ultimately impact far more lives than either of them could predict. 2 months after the fateful charity gala, the sign outside the former Whitfield Industries R&D facility was replaced with a sleek modern logo, Phoenix Technology. The quantum computing division that had once been the desperate last hope of a dying family business was now an independent entity backed by one of the most successful tech companies in the world. Inside her new office, Alex, who had indeed legally changed her surname to Wright, reviewed the final hiring reports from HR. The transition had been challenging, but exhilarating. Nearly 80% of the original development team had chosen to stay with Phoenix, attracted by the company's innovative technology and Alex's vision for a more inclusive corporate culture. Replacing the remaining 20% had presented an unexpected opportunity. Alex had implemented new hiring practices that emphasized diversity while maintaining rigorous technical standards. The result was a significantly more varied team than had existed under Whitfield Industries, with different backgrounds bringing fresh perspectives to long-standing challenges. The new neural network interface team has confirmed, her assistant informed her, placing another report on her desk. They start next Monday. Alex nodded, glancing at the team roster. Excellent. Make sure Dr. Rodriguez has everything she needs for orientation. Her work at MIT was groundbreaking, and I want to be sure she feels supported from day one. As her assistant left, Alex turned to the window looking out at the Cambridge Innovation District where Phoenix had established its headquarters. The move from Whitfield Industries' stately Boston offices to this more modern collaborative space symbolized the company's fresh start. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call. The name on the screen made her hesitate. Harrison Whitfield. Her father had been calling regularly since she moved out, though their conversations remained strained. She took a deep breath and answered, "Hello, Dad." "Alexandra, I mean Alex," he corrected himself. He was trying, at least. "How are things at Phoenix?" "Busy. Productive. We're making real progress on the quantum encryption protocols." She kept her tone professional, still uncertain where the boundaries of their relationship should be. That's wonderful." An awkward pause followed. "I'm calling because I wanted to let you know about some changes here." Alex braced herself. The remnants of Whitfield Industries had been struggling through bankruptcy proceedings, selling off assets to pay creditors. She deliberately kept her distance from the process, focusing instead on building Phoenix. "What kind of changes?" Harrison's voice grew stronger. "I've enrolled in a diversity and inclusion workshop series at Berkeley College. It's primarily for their music business students, but they accepted me as a case study of sorts. And I've been seeing a therapist, working through some long-standing issues." Alex was genuinely surprised. Her father had always dismissed therapy as fashionable nonsense for people who can't solve their own problems. "That's good to hear, Dad. Really. It's not easy," he admitted. "Facing the ways I've failed as a businessman, as a husband, as a father. But it's necessary." And Mom, Alex asked carefully, mentioning her mother for the first time in weeks. Harrison sighed heavily. "That's the other reason I'm calling. Your mother and I, we're separating. I've moved into the Beacon Hill apartment." Despite everything, Alex felt a pang of sadness. Her parents had been together for nearly 40 years. Flawed as their relationship had been, the finality of this separation marked the true end of her childhood family. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said, meaning it. "How is she taking it?" "Not well," Harrison admitted. "She refuses to acknowledge any need for change. When I suggested she join me for one of the workshops, she accused me of betraying our heritage. She's still convinced that if we had just handled the PR better, everything would have blown over." Alex wasn't surprised. Her mother's capacity for denial had always been impressive. And the house, will she be able to keep it? No. That's been the hardest pill for her to swallow. The mansion goes on the market next week. Between the company's debts and the legal settlements from shareholders, there's simply no way to hold on to it. After they hung up, Alex sat quietly processing her complicated feelings. While she had no desire to return to her old life, there was still grief in watching it disintegrate so completely. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. It was Michael Chen, Isaiah's COO, who had been working closely with Phoenix during the transition. "Got a minute?" he asked. Isaiah had just sent over the quarterly integration report. Alex gestured him in. "Of course. How are things looking from Monarch's perspective?" Michael's expression was positive as he sat down. "Better than projected, actually. Your team's quantum encryption algorithm is performing exceptionally well in trials. Isaiah is impressed." "That's good to hear," Alex said, genuinely pleased. Isaiah Washington had proven to be everything she'd hoped for in a business partner, demanding but fair, challenging but supportive. "He also wanted me to follow up on the incubator proposal," Michael continued. "The board is interested, but they want more details on implementation and costs." The incubator had been Alex's idea, a program to support startups led by underrepresented groups in tech, with Phoenix and Monarch providing funding, mentorship, and access to their quantum computing resources. "I'll have the full proposal by tomorrow," Alex promised. "It's nearly complete." After Michael left, Alex returned to the window, reflecting on how much had changed in just 2 months. She thought back to the person she'd been at the charity gala, uncomfortable with her family's attitudes, but still unwilling to directly challenge them, still complicit. The incident with Isaiah had forced her to finally choose a side. It had been painful, yes, but also liberating in ways she hadn't anticipated. For the first time in her life, her external actions aligned perfectly with her internal values. The constant cognitive dissonance she had lived with for years had finally been resolved. Her intercom buzzed. "Dr. Wright, your 3 o'clock is here." The MIT student recruitment team. "Send them in," she replied, smiling at the use of her new name. It still felt strange sometimes, but increasingly right. Right. A fresh page. A new story. As she greeted the recruitment team, Alex felt a surge of purpose. Phoenix wasn't just about innovative technology. It was about creating a model for what business could be when freed from the constraints of prejudice and tradition. It was about proving that ethical practices and commercial success weren't mutually exclusive. And perhaps most importantly, it was about her own personal Phoenix moment, rising from the ashes of a privileged but constrained upbringing to forge a more authentic and meaningful life. One where she could look in the mirror each morning and be proud of the reflection looking back at her. The transformation was still in progress both for Alex and for Phoenix Technology, but for the first time in her life she was genuinely excited about the journey ahead, however uncertain it might be. 1 year later, the ballroom of the Boston Harbor Hotel was once again filled with the city's elite for the annual Children's Hospital benefit. The same crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. The same orchestra played classical selections in the corner, and many of the same guests circulated with champagne flutes in hand. But for Isaiah Washington and Alex Wright, standing together near the entrance, the similarities only highlighted how profoundly their circumstances had changed. "Hard to believe it's been exactly 1 year," Alex remarked, surveying the room. "Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago." Isaiah nodded, adjusting his perfectly tailored tuxedo, a far cry from the waiter's uniform he had worn the last time he stood in this space. Some experiences are transformative enough to create a clear before and after in one's life. For both of us, I think that night qualifies. They were attending as featured speakers for the evening's program. The gala organizers had invited them to discuss the Phoenix Technology Incubator, which had already launched 5 promising startups led by entrepreneurs from underrepresented backgrounds. Their success had become something of a case study in the business world, how adversity and prejudice had inadvertently sparked a more innovative and inclusive venture than might otherwise have existed. Isaiah, Alex. The event chairwoman approached, beaming. "We're so honored to have you both here tonight. Your journey is truly inspiring." "Thank you for including us," Isaiah replied graciously. "The Children's Hospital has always been a cause close to my heart." As they made small talk, Isaiah noticed Alex's attention drift toward the entrance. Following her gaze, he saw Harrison Whitfield entering the ballroom alone. The former patriarch of Whitfield Industries looked markedly different from a year ago. Thinner, less imposing, but somehow more at peace. "Your father's here," Isaiah observed quietly. Alex nodded. He mentioned he'd bought a ticket. "It's part of his redemption journey, I suppose." Facing the scene of the crime, Harrison spotted them and hesitated visibly before making his way over. Isaiah watched the interplay of emotions on Alex's face, caution, lingering hurt, but also a tentative warmth. "Alexandra, Alex, I mean. Isaiah." Harrison greeted them both with a formal nod. "You both look well." "Thank you, Dad," Alex replied. "How are you settling into the new place?" After the Beacon Hill mansion had been sold, Harrison had purchased a modest condominium in Cambridge, not far from Phoenix's headquarters. It was a dramatic downsizing, but he had embraced the change with surprising grace. "It's liberating, actually," he said. "Less space, less weight of history." "I've been volunteering with that STEM program for high school students," I mentioned. It's been eye-opening. Isaiah observed the interaction with interest. He had been skeptical of Harrison's transformation, suspecting it might be a temporary reaction to crisis rather than a genuine change of heart. But the man standing before him now seemed humbled in a way that suggested real growth. "I should find my table," Harrison said after a moment. "Perhaps we could catch up later, Alex." "I'd like that," she replied, and Isaiah could tell she meant it. As Harrison moved away, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. Eleanor Whitfield, dressed in an obviously expensive but slightly dated gown, was arguing with the event security. "This is absurd," her voice carried across the ballroom. "The Whitfield family has attended this gala for generations. I have every right to be here." The security manager was attempting to explain something to her. His expression, professionally apologetic but firm, beside Isaiah, Alex tensed. "Did you know she would be here?" Isaiah asked quietly. Alex shook her head. "No, she wasn't invited. After last year's incident, the hospital board voted unanimously to remove her from their donor list. Dad must have bought his own ticket." They watched as Eleanor continued to protest, her voice rising. Guests were beginning to stare, conversations faltering as the scene played out. "I should go over there," Alex said reluctantly. "Try to minimize the drama." Isaiah placed a gentle hand on her arm. "Are you sure you're not responsible for her behavior anymore? That was the whole point of the changes you've made." Alex considered this, then nodded. "You're right. I'm not responsible for her, but I can choose to respond with compassion even if she hasn't earned it. That's who I want to be." Isaiah watched as she crossed the room, approaching her mother with calm dignity. Though he couldn't hear their exchange, he could see Eleanor's initial shock at her daughter's appearance, followed by what appeared to be a tense but controlled conversation. After a few minutes, Alex guided her mother to a quiet corner of the lobby, away from prying eyes and phone cameras. Whatever was said there remained between mother and daughter, but when Alex returned to Isaiah's side 10 minutes later, her expression was composed, if somber. "Everything all right?" he asked. "As all right as it can be," Alex replied. "She's going home, but she did ask about Phoenix, which is something. A year ago, she refused to even acknowledge its existence. Progress comes in small steps, sometimes," Isaiah observed. "Indeed." Alex straightened her shoulders, visibly shifting focus. "But tonight isn't about the past. It's about the future we're building." As if on cue, the event chairwoman approached the podium and called for everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to introduce our featured speakers for tonight. Please welcome Isaiah Washington, CEO of Monarch Enterprises, and Alexandra Wright, CEO of Phoenix Technology." The applause was enthusiastic as they made their way to the stage. Standing at the podium looking out at the assembled crowd, Isaiah felt a profound sense of symmetry. 1 year ago, in this very room, an act of prejudice had destroyed one future and inadvertently created another better one. "Thank you," he began. "It's a special privilege to be here tonight in a room that holds significant meaning for both Miss Wright and myself." A knowing murmur rippled through the audience. The incident was still remembered, though it had largely faded from active gossip. 1 year ago, a moment of conflict in this very ballroom changed the trajectory of multiple lives and businesses. What could have been merely a cautionary tale about the consequences of prejudice instead became a story of transformation. He glanced at Alex, who nodded for him to continue. Phoenix Technology rose from that moment, not despite the challenges, but because of them. Because Miss Wright had the courage to break with tradition, to reimagine what a technology company could be and who it could serve. He stepped aside, allowing Alex to take the podium. "When we founded the Phoenix Technology Incubator, she began our goal was to create opportunities for brilliant minds that might otherwise be overlooked due to bias, prejudice, or lack of connections. In just 1 year, our first cohort of startups has secured over $30 million in additional funding and created more than 100 jobs. As she continued detailing the incubator's success, Isaiah watched the audience's reactions. Most were genuinely engaged, though he noted Harrison Whitfield listening with an expression of mingled pride and regret. Near the back of the ballroom, almost hidden by a decorative column, Eleanor Whitfield had apparently decided not to leave after all. She stood alone, watching her daughter speak, with an unreadable expression. Whether she was experiencing remorse, resentment, or something more complex was impossible to tell. What mattered more, Isaiah realized, was that her power to harm had been neutralized, not through punishment or revenge, but through the success of those she had dismissed as unworthy. There could be no more eloquent response to prejudice than excellence. As the presentation concluded, and they made their way back to their table amid enthusiastic applause, Isaiah felt a sense of closure. The wine stain on his waiter's uniform had long since been cleaned away. The billion-dollar deal that had died that night had been replaced by something smaller in financial terms, but far more significant in human impact. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass to Alex. "And to unexpected catalysts," she replied, with a small smile clinking her glass against his. Across the room, Eleanor Whitfield finally turned and walked toward the exit alone with the consequences of her actions. The Whitfield name that had once opened every door in Boston now belonged to a fading dynasty. The fortune built over generations had been largely dismantled. The family itself had splintered, perhaps irreparably. But from those fragments, something new and more valuable had emerged. Phoenix Technology was flourishing its innovative approach to quantum computing, matched by its groundbreaking corporate culture. Alex Wright had found her authentic voice and purpose. Even Harrison Whitfield, in his reduced circumstances, seemed to have discovered a more meaningful existence than his previous life of privilege had afforded. As Isaiah and Alex joined the other guests for dinner, their conversation turned to future plans, new technologies expanding the incubator, potential collaborations between their companies. They had moved beyond defining themselves by what they opposed and were now fully focused on what they could create together. The transformation was complete. The resolution, however, was just beginning a new chapter in a story that would continue to unfold in unexpected ways, touching lives far beyond those present in the ballroom that night. What do you think? Could you forgive someone like Eleanor? Or would you cut ties completely as Alex initially did? Would you be able to rebuild after such a public and costly mistake? Drop a comment below with your thoughts. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories about consequences, redemption, and transformation. Share this video with someone who might need a reminder that our choices define us more than our circumstances or background. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one family's fall from grace and another's rise to authentic success. Until next time, remember that it's never too late to change your story. The story of Isaiah Washington and the Whitfield family teaches us that character matters more than privilege or wealth. A single moment of prejudice cost the Whitfields a billion-dollar deal, and their century-old legacy showing how racism can have devastating consequences beyond moral failings. True transformation requires acknowledging wrongdoing rather than making excuses. Eleanor's inability to recognize her prejudice led to her downfall, while Alexandra's courage to confront uncomfortable truths allowed her to build something better. Isaiah demonstrated that excellence and dignity are powerful responses to discrimination. Rather than seeking revenge, he made business decisions based on character and values, creating opportunity where others might have seen only conflict. The story reminds us that we're defined not by our family name or circumstances, but by the choices we make. Sometimes the most important growth happens when we're forced to confront our complicity in harmful systems and have the courage to chart a new path forward. What prejudices might be holding you back in your own life? Have you ever witnessed discrimination that you regret not speaking against? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you've experienced your own moment of transformation like Alexandra, I'd love to hear how you broke free from harmful patterns or environments. Drop a comment with your story. Don't forget to hit the like button if this story resonated with you, and subscribe for more powerful narratives about overcoming prejudice and finding authentic success. Share this video with someone who might need encouragement to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one family's fall from grace and another's rise to authentic success. Until next time, remember that our true wealth lies in our character, not our bank accounts.